This has become quite ridiculous because every time I woke up, there is sunshine outside, I say today it's the right day to film a video, and then after lunch, when I am actually getting ready to film, it starts raining. I got a grudge against this country. I think it's doing it on purpose at this point. Welcome back everyone to my channel. Today I'm kind of doing like a lead up to my worst reads of the year. These are the most disappointing books. So these are books that I didn't necessarily hate. They probably were all 3 stars and I didn't hate them by any means. I was just expecting way more. And I think this is quite relevant because this year in 2022, actually last year, I started doing my shelf TBR where I would go through all my shelves, books unread on my shelves. So the fact that I bought them, kept them on my shelves for years probably, and then ultimately found them disappointing, not at least a 4 stars, but for me it was a letdown, if it makes sense. I will start with a few Fairyloots that I've unfortunately read and were very meh, and then I'll go through all the others. Many of those I've got written off, so I don't have a physical copy, but I'll put pictures on. So without further ado, let's go into the most disappointing but not necessarily horrible books, because I have a list of worst books of the year that is entitled Books That Are a Crime Against Society. Not all of them, not all the ones that I actively disliked were a crime against society, but many were. So you have to stay tuned and wait for the final video in this trilogy if you want to know what was very much the worst of the worst. But yeah, without further ado, let's get into the just meh. And someone might say, oh, meh is like disliking. I don't agree. It's just like I feel meh about apples. I don't particularly love them, but I would eat them if needed and I wouldn't hate the experience of eating it. But I would hate and probably throw up if you, I don't know, gave me gnocchi or lasagna. Like I hated those. So that's the difference. It doesn't know if it makes sense. I used food because I thought everybody can understand food preferences. And so I would start with some of Fairyloots releases that unfortunately didn't hit the mark for me and again stayed that kind of in the middle. So let's start with quite very recent one, Belladonna. Belladonna is a YA and you've got this girl where basically she can see death and all the people in her life have died, all her relatives, and she just bounces from family to family trying to find a home, and she basically cannot die because every time she ingests poison, for example, she just doesn't die, and she has this special relationship with death, and you follow her and death solving this mystery together. And I don't know, I like the writing. The story was just okay though. I really don't care much and I don't want to continue on. Didn't dislike it, looks lovely, but again I think somehow something of the plot didn't get my attention. And the same could be said for The Darkening. This is a very complex synopsis to explain, but basically it's kind of a dystopian fantasy world where people live in circles. The people in the middle are the most wealthy one, the one that are doing the best, and then you got the outer circles, overpopulated, they have hardships, they don't have enough food and everything. And what is happening in this world is that there is a storm coming, threatening to cover the whole city, and when the storm will eventually cover the whole city, everybody will die because this is a storm. It's a magical storm that basically kills everything in its path. And so you follow this girl from the outskirts having to infiltrate the inner circles and try to save her people and try to find out what happens to her mother that entered the storm. And then just gonna leave it at that. And it sounds amazing. This unfortunately is more on the probably like very low 3 stars. I just didn't click with the characters or the plot. However, the plot was more interesting than the characters and the writing was good overall. But I won't continue on. I don't care enough. I don't even remember the protagonist, what happens in the end. I liked when we got finally to know more about the storm itself. That was fascinating, but not enough to redeem the whole book or for me saying, oh, I should read more. Said that, I might keep an eye out, maybe on Script, and if a sequel is very well rated, I might check it out. Which is the same, I guess, for all of these books I'm about to say. Like, I will keep an eye out for the sequel. If it gets stellar review, I might continue on eventually. And then I've got Only a Monster. Now, this I love the premise because this is about this girl. She goes and spends the summer in London with relatives, you know, just for the summer, just to get an odd job here and there and just spend time with family, friends, and just, yeah, life experience basically. But when she goes there, she finds out that her family belong to a family of monsters. So in this society there are monsters and monster hunters, and there are different families, there are different monsters, and our main protagonist is one of those heirs of one of these monstrous family. What disappointed me in this is not much the writing or the plot. The plot was okay, like the characters were okay, but I just couldn't buy the fact that these people are considered monsters, because there was nothing monstrous about them. Like, they weren't even unlikable character. Like, they were the good guys, clearly. And so for me, I just couldn't suspend belief in calling them monsters. I wished they had just called them something else, because this was sold to me as, you know, unlikable characters, monstrous people, like, you know, you following the bad guy or the bad girl in this sense, and definitely that's not the case. Directly from behind me, I've got The Girl Who Fell Beneath the Sea. This is stunning. This is one of the most beautiful Fairyloots editions of this last year, for sure. I love this color palette. And this is inspired by a Korean legend where basically the sea is a god, and he requires a human bride every 30 years in order to stay calm and let the people in these villages just, you know, fish and thrive. And if he's angry, he needs a new bride. So they sacrifice young women every 30 years, and that year they are about to sacrifice the love of the brother of our main protagonist, and she ends up going down in the deep sea to the sea god herself. And a lot of people describe this as kind of reading a Studio Ghibli movie, and I didn't get that vibe. I'm sorry, I just didn't get it. I was constantly distracted, and I just didn't love this at all. I found this extremely bland, like very, very bland. I don't remember anything of the plot already, and I don't remember anything about the characters. I didn't hate it. I read it, it was okay. I was very fascinated in the beginning, but then it fell flat very quickly. If you hear any noise, it's the rain outside. And then we have Daughter of the Moon Goddess. Oh, maybe this is the best. I don't know, I can't decide between these two guys. Like, they are just so pretty. These two are the only ones that I will keep, just because it just looks so good. Like, I can't sell them. I just can't. Like, my book Love the Heart, just can't sell them. I actually acquired even the sequel of these. It's just a duology, but I just couldn't not have them. And this is a story of the Daughter of the Moon Goddess. The Moon Goddess has been put in exile on the moon, I believe, and she is there with her daughter, but her daughter is hidden from all the other gods' eyes. Like, no one knows that she has this daughter until there is a threat, there is something happening, and this daughter, she has to go under disguise to live basically at the center of the empire. Like, I think like a god, other gods, sun gods have this kind of empire, and she has to go there and try and save her mother that has been exiled for so long. And when she is there, she meets the prince, and they become very good friends. And this wasn't bad. I read it, and I think I did really like all the characters. However, the plot itself didn't grip me. Like, I found too long of a book for the plot that it was in it. I found the events predictable, and I was expecting way more according to the reviews that I heard. So these are books that now I don't own that I can think of. So let's start with a very popular one again. Everybody's raving about these, and I found these upsetting and touching, but ultimately I didn't love it by no means. And this is Crying H Mart. This is the story of a singer. She has actually a band, and this is a non-fiction about her story of dealing with her mother having been diagnosed with cancer, eventually dying from cancer, and her not having a relationship with her mother, and then in the last final months of her mother life trying to rebuild or try to help her mother as much as possible. And I am someone who has health anxiety, and so for me this was extremely triggering. But I just ultimately, I was expecting amazing writing or amazing quotes or I don't know, something else, something more deep, and I didn't get it. So yeah, I didn't love this as much as anybody else, although it's a 3.5 stars. It's by no means bad. I think there's something maybe wrong with me. Maybe it was triggered because of health anxiety. I don't know. I just struggle with these. I just didn't love this very much. And the other one that actually quite almost disliked, but ultimately was just like very meh, is The Name of a Star. This is a YA where basically you follow this girl. She's going to boarding school in London, and all of a sudden she sees this man, and then there is this atrocious murder, like very similar to Jack the Ripper murders, but no one sees the assassin, no one sees the murder apart from our main protagonist. It's a bit of a paranormal fantasy if you want, and this felt so uninteresting ultimately, and I think I just got fed up with all Jack the Ripper retellings, because I studied a lot Jack the Ripper, the true story, and just don't need retellings because they very much feel the same over and over and over again. So they don't have the element of, oh, what's gonna happen next, or I don't know. I just don't feel, I never found a retelling compelling as of now. I've not read them all, but don't hate me for these. Dune. I finally read it with a stellar, brilliant edition, and I actually didn't dislike it. I was actually at one point fearing that I would loathe and really dislike this book, and I didn't. I think I was so weirded out, like, so I was like, what is this? Like, what am I reading about? That I read this in probably a week, which is surprising, but ultimately felt like, okay, get the hype, but I am not on the same bandwagon. And I might check the sequels out, or I might just watch the movies, which sounds more reasonable. Said that I will keep this because this is just brilliant, and I might reread it in the future. This is one of those books that I felt very meh about it. However, I'm thinking that maybe when I am more, I don't know, older, more into, I don't know, dense and abstract at the same time, plots and writing, I might appreciate this more. I think upon reread I might change my mind, either for the better or the worse, that I don't know. And I might check out the sequels. If I do nice editions like this one, I will probably check out and buy the editions, the next ones. I've got The Labyrinth of the Spirits is up there, but I'm not gonna get it. So The Labyrinth of the Spirits is the final book in a quartet, and this is the Cemetery of the Forgotten books by Zafon. Zafon wrote one of my favorite books ever, and this is the last book in the quartet that starts with The Shadow of a Wind. And unfortunately, none of the books that followed The Shadow of a Wind even came close to what The Shadow of a Wind was for me, like the amount of love I have. This is the premise of this quartet, is basically you got this father bring his son one day to the Cemetery of the Forgotten Books. So it's a secret library where he can choose a book that has been out of print or banned or is not out for public consumption anymore. He can then choose a book and keep the book and kind of like having as its own treasure. And what happens though is that our main protagonist, David, I think it's called David, he finds a book and he becomes obsessed with the author because this author has disappeared, and he is gonna retrace the steps of this author, who he was, what happened to him, and so forth. So The Shadow of the Wind, this historical thriller book, was one of the best historical thrillers ever. Like, I loved it with all my heart. None of the other installments, which either tackle the history before The Shadow of the Wind or right after, came even closer to that magnificent beast that it was Shadow of the Wind. And The Labyrinth of the Spirits was 800 pages long, was the longest book I've read this year, and it was ultimately very dragging, not enough plot whatsoever to justify such a lengthy book. However, Zafon, he's one of my favorite writers ever, so I did read 800 pages just because he wrote it, and it was for like a 3.5 stars, and it closed things up enough, so I'm happy that it's done. But I was always looking for the same amount of excitement and love that I had for Shadow of the Wind, you know, its following installments, and never found it. So ultimately I was having like a lot of hopes for The Labyrinth of the Spirits, and it just felt a bit flat. The Butterfly Garden, this is a thriller. You've got this girl that she's abducted and she finds herself in a garden of this serial killer, basically, that he collects girls, keeps them for a while, and then eventually murders them. And it was just not bad, and I like the fact that this is a thriller recounted by the survivor of this atrocious experience after she's been liberated. So you know this from the start, and so you go back, and that was a very new perspective when reading a thriller. So again, these are 3.5 stars. By no means I hated it, but it was too far-fetched. It's not possible. Because this wasn't a fantasy thriller or anything of the sort, I just couldn't buy what had happened. I was just like, no way in hell this would ever happen. So it kind of suffered from that. Keturah and Lord Death. So this is a book that I am obsessed with. The last page, or the last couple of pages. The way, like, the end was magnificent, but all the rest I really didn't care. And I kept that book on my shelves, wanting to read it for years and years. I heard amazing things about this, and ultimately I was just like, all of that to get to this magnificent ending, but you know, I can't just dismiss the 3/4 of this book I really didn't like. And this is the story of this girl. I don't even remember precisely the plot, but basically she makes a deal with death, and now she has to die, and within a few days. So she says, you know, okay, I'm gonna die, or I'm gonna exchange my soul for somebody else, but let me have a few days in my village so I can, you know, put things in order. And death accepts her propositions, but there is a kavod to that, and so she has to find out how to, you know, make use of that kavod so she doesn't have to die. Something of a sort. I'll keep it very vague. And again, unfortunately, I really disliked the main protagonist, and I loved the ending. So ultimately, together with me suffering for 3/4 and then having that kind of ending, I have to give like a bit of a meh rating. But this is one that I think you make your mind on. It's a very weird tale, short tale, and the ending was brilliant, to be fair. The Northern Lights. I've read it finally, and I couldn't have felt more meh if I tried. I don't see it, guys. I heard that the TV show is amazing, so I will check it out. I think I was too old by the time I got around to reading these. You want to read these when you're a teen, maybe like even like a middle grade. Felt like middle grade, felt like I just couldn't care much. However, I did enjoy some parts of the plot. I liked the end. I just ultimately though, like, I didn't hate it by any means. I think it was a very solid 3.5 stars, and some parts really stuck with me. I think just the middle part I just couldn't care much. So I like the initial part, I like the ending, but the rest was just okay. It was 3 stars, 3.5. I want to check out the TV show, but I'm not gonna continue on just because the process of reading these I didn't enjoy that much. I like the plot in itself, but I don't know, maybe it was the writing didn't work for me that much. I don't know. I'll check out the TV show though, and I've donated my copy because I don't need to keep it. Bone Criers Down, the sequel of a YA duology that I really enjoyed the first book of. I listened to this on audiobook the first, and then I saw the special edition of Fairyloots and just said, yeah, let me get that, it's gonna be amazing, and said it was just like very meh. This premise of this duology you've got these two girls, they are witches, and in this world, witches, this kind of witches basically, in order to ferry the dead, they have to kind of have like a male partner that they will mate with and then eventually kill. And you follow a few perspectives in this. So you follow, you know, the daughters of these witches, so they're about to, you know, find their mate and go along with this process, while at the same time you follow the boy of one of these men who has been sacrificed, and he's angry and he wants revenge, and their lives clash. And I didn't loathe these at all. Like I think it was entertaining for what it was, but it wasn't as good as the first book. And there's been too many months for me to remember exactly why I didn't love this, but I think I've done a review on my channel, so I went into more details. Again, this is one that I like the plot, I just didn't like the way it was executed, or the pace that it kept, or how events unfolded or were recounted. But in itself, the plot itself was okay. And again, it's another 3 stars for sure. I'll keep these, and I might maybe listen to both back to back and just really compare them. But to be fair, many criticized the sequel, unfortunately. But something wasn't there, and I think it was probably the way the characters engage with each other. Things got too rushed. Maybe this would have benefited from being actually stretched a bit more. I don't know. One of the most disappointing things I've read this year was Razorblade Tears. Now, this is the story of these two fathers. Their sons are gay and married to each other, and they get killed. And these two fathers, they've both gone to prison, they both have a rough history, and they both didn't accept the fact that their sons were queer. They have to come together to resolve, you know, who did it, why did they do it, and then ultimately getting revenge. Unfortunately, I think this suffered a lot from trying to be like a remake of Sons of Anarchy, and no one touches Sons of Anarchy. Like, you can't do it. You can't do a remake of Sons of Anarchy. Just leave that perfect TV show alone. You just can't reproduce that. And I think this was trying to be very gritty to a point that it became a bit too much. Like, I don't know, I found this cheesy in some points. Really missed the mark for me. This was not meant to be cheesy. This was meant to be like harrowing and horrible, and instead for me it felt like trying too hard, if it makes sense. So I didn't hate it, but I just kept thinking, oh, this is nothing like Sons of Anarchy, it's just trying too hard, just please stop. Because the topics in these were interesting, I just think they weren't explored enough. I think this could have been done with way more exploration of, you know, of relationships with fathers, of each other, of prejudice, and I think all of those topics were there but not explored as much as they could have. So yeah, maybe it was also very short, so that's why we didn't have much time to explore those topics, but I just thought the potential was there. It was just executed in a way that missed a lot of opportunities to develop certain things and tried too hard to be very sassy. Sorry guys, I had to switch on the light because it was getting too dark. And so then I've got Dark Blood. This is the fourth, fifth, I don't even remember, book in detective series, so thriller crime series, and I have loved all the other installments and this felt very flat. I think just the author divides the plot in these, so you follow two different plots that eventually do come together, but I just couldn't care about neither of them. So I didn't hate it because I love his writing and I love how this detective and his comrades and, you know, the other police officers, like I literally had some very good laughs just because of the dynamics of the team and how much trouble this detective keeps getting in. So I kept loving Logan as detective, but the mystery in this one in particular I didn't love that much. And Blameless, I think I just grew out of this. So this is a fantasy YA new adult series, probably takes place in Victorian era, so where you got vampires, werewolf out in the open, and then you've got your main protagonist. She's got very special powers in the sense that she negates the powers of other creatures. So if a vampire is next to her or actually physically touches her, I believe, he stops having all the superpowers that a vampire might have. So she neutralized these creatures' powers, and for that she is then in a very, you know, delicate spot, and a lot of people want her dead. Fair enough, I understand it. And then she might be interested in this werewolf who is the leader of the pack and so on. And I think this is book number 4. The plot in itself is not interesting for me anymore. Like, I love the characters, I love their dynamics, but I would honestly prefer probably to read a short story about their everyday life than them actually trying to move forward the plot, finding mysteries and stuff that I don't find particularly interesting. So again, it was another 3.5, 3 stars. Like the writing and the characters, but I don't know, I think either things spice up a bit or maybe I just need to just let this go. Now the Bone Shaker. The Bone Shaker is a bit of a weird lengthy synopsis, so I'm going to try to simplify as much as possible. But you follow the son or daughter, but I'm going to go with the son because I remember, and I think it's the son, of this engineer that back in the days invented this machine thinking it was gonna be like the next revolutionary thing, just gonna change for the better people life, but in reality when he makes this machine go, he destroys half Seattle. I believe it was Seattle, the city, but it might be another US town. So basically he makes this machine go, destroys the town, and this part of the town has been destroyed, is now, some people have been zombified, and so it has become like behind the walls, no one can enter, and if you enter it's basically hell. And so you got this son of this engineer that now has passed away or disappeared, wanting to go back to this city to find the answers on why his father did what he did, what went wrong, and so forth, because of course everybody basically hates this engineer. And I didn't love the plot of this one. I thought it was kind of predictable. I didn't mind the characters and the pacing and the writing, but ultimately it definitely wasn't as exciting or as innovative as I wished. It felt very much like a dystopian I'd read or watched before. A Certain Slant of Light. This is about this ghost girl that is hunting this professor and no one can see her. No one saw her in the past like centuries since she became a ghost. And then this boy, one time he gets to class as a new boy and he sees her. Basically got this boy wanted to try and help her and vice versa. And this was very meh. I liked the premise, and there were a couple of scenes that I really liked. One scene toward the end I was just like, oh okay, this is rough, I actually enjoyed this. But overall, again, that one scene wasn't enough to redeem all the rest. It's like with Cthulhu and Lord Death. Although this was worse than Cthulhu and Lord Death because this didn't elicit any emotions from me. While Cthulhu and Lord Death, for the beginning, I was just like, oh, I'm actually disliking these. And then, boom, I loved it in the end. But this was always meh. So just that scene made my interest spike a bit, but then it fell flat very soon after. The Secret History by Donna Tartt, another one that Dark Academia is not for me, guys, probably. I've realized this. Yeah, I've tried a few now and I didn't hate any of them, but I definitely never liked any of them. Well, I did hate one of them, If You Were a Villain. Back in the days, a few years back, that was one of my first reads of a year. Like, I hated that one. Anyway, The Secret History felt very meh. Too many pages for not enough plot, not enough tension build, because we knew where this was going. And I was expecting like a thriller mystery more on, we did this and then reconstructed, kind of like How to Get Away with Murder, the TV show, if you've seen it. If you've not seen it, you should, because Viola Davis and just the plot of that is perfect. That is what, in my mind, was gonna be A Secret History. It wasn't nearly that exciting. A book just committed suicide. That wasn't nearly as exciting as How to Get Away with Murder. I think she could have built the tension way more, and actually in The Little Friend that I've read by her, I actually preferred The Little Friend to this, because the atmosphere that she created in The Little Friend sipped under my skin way more than this. This felt very meh. It's about a bunch of unlikable characters that ultimately don't do much apart from falling apart, but not even falling apart in a very spectacular way, in a sense. Like, yes, stuff happened, but I always felt like he was almost getting there and then he never did, and then he fell flat again. It was just almost like, and yeah, I couldn't explain it with words, so I hope that made sense. And speaking of disappointing, not bad, because actually I did quite overall enjoy this book. It was very 3.5 stars. The Atlas 6. I know, this is very unpopular. And I just told you, Dark Academia is not my jam, is it? I love the characters themselves, but I could call the plot twists a mile away. And ultimately, where is the academia part? I don't know, I always want to see the academic part of it. Like, I want to see the lessons, I want to see what they're doing, not just the characterization, which is as important as the rest, but is as important, not more important. Just for me, characterization and plot have to go together. And this worked wonderfully in terms of writing, aesthetic of the book, because I had the Fairyloots edition, and characterization, and the plot though was just like, okay. So I will read the sequel, definitely. It was a 3.5 stars, like I didn't hate it by any means. I quite enjoy many parts of this, but ultimately didn't love it as much as everybody else. I didn't love it. I was okay with it. And finally, let's finish with the good guy's girl, the guy, the verb.
A few moments later.
Good Girl Guides to Murder, an audiobook that I listened to, and I was very much expecting to at least have some laughs or something, and it was just okay. I think this is a YA crime thriller where basically there is like this girl, she has decided now to solve a cold case from the town where this girl disappeared, and this boy has been accused of killing her and hiding the body, and she will team up with the brother of this infamous boy to find out what happened actually. And this was full of twists, and I think it did keep me engaged, and I did like overall some of the twists because again I couldn't see them coming. However, I was waiting to get more attached to the characters, more interested in the plot, more like I want to know absolutely what happens, and I got there in a couple of occasions, but not constantly, but not enough occasions for me to just say, oh, I need to go and read the sequel. I never felt, and I've listened to this in February probably, never felt like I wanted to go on and read the sequels. And for me that is a sign that the book was not bad, but it wasn't as good, because I would definitely read and want to and look forward to listen or read the sequel if I like the book enough. So the fact that I don't know if I will ever continue on, I might not, is for me a sign that this was very meh. And that is all I could think about in this moment in time. But the next video is gonna be the books I really disliked. And unfortunately there is a very unpopular opinion in there. So, but yeah, I'm gonna see you next time with that video. Let me know what you found disappointing. Not your worst. Keep your worst for my worst video. I'm gonna ask you about the worst book of 2022 in that video. But now, just tell me about the disappointing reads. The reads that felt flat, meh, were okay, but you didn't love as much as you were expecting, as I did in all of these. Thank you for watching, guys. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you next time. Ciao!